Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and this will be my spoiler talk on DC and Warner Bros. The Flash movie, directed by Andy Muschietti. Um, and I'm just gonna just jump right in and just talk about the movie, my thoughts on all of the spoiler stuff. So if you haven't seen it, I'll give you 5 seconds to step away before you continue watching. All right. So as I said in my non-spoiler review for the movie, the best part of it is definitely the dynamic between Ezra Miller's two Barry Allens, the one from the main timeline where he starts from, and then the one that he creates by time traveling back to save his mom to prevent her death. And the special effects on having the two Barrys in the movie was really good, and also the effects of like the flashes like running just with the new kind of gold lightning aesthetic, and then also in the actual Speed Force was really cool and really spot on. Like I didn't see anything wrong with that at all. But and in the whole third act of the movie, the action scenes, that CGI was fucking terrible. That shit looked like a video game, and like not even a good video game. It looked like an old video game from maybe like PS3 era. Um, so it was kind of crazy. Um, and I'm surprised that they even released a movie looking like that, especially with how long it took for this movie to come out. But maybe they just they didn't want to spend no more money on it, and they're just like fuck it. And I feel like it might have even been a creative choice to some degree, where they're like, this shit is goofy. Let's just let it be goofy. And that's how it looked. That's how it was displayed to us. Um, that's not for me. If that was a stylistic choice, I prefer more realism in movies in general, and especially in these types of movies. Because if it doesn't look real, at least in the case of this movie, it took me out of the movie, out of like buying into what was going on. So it was distracting to me. I was thinking about things that I should not have been thinking about. Um, in those moments where it was very wonky looking. So I did not like that. Um, that whole like multiverse kind of collision scene, I did not like. That's mostly because of the CGI, probably, but it also raised, I think, some ethical concerns in terms of portraying actors who are no longer living. Because normally I would think that you would have to ask the family, and they would have to give permission to use the likeness of those people because they can't speak for themselves anymore. And if the permission was granted, then okay, it's fine. But I feel like it was very distasteful the way that they presented it because it was not good. It was not good quality. So even doing it at all was just like not a good idea to me if they were gonna do it like that. And just because this movie did a similar thing, I am going to compare it to Across the Spider Verse, the new Spider-Man movie that came out from Sony Animation, where they also had a bunch of Spider people, including the live-action ones, even though it was an animated movie, and they showed the events of those like timelines or version of events. That I think worked for that movie because they showed the actual footage from those movies as we had seen them. Whereas here, it was supposed to be the characters from old movies played by those actors, but in like a modern setting where they are witnessing what is happening with the multiverse, with this whole collision, with all the different worlds colliding. Which actually, hats off to the marketing team who came up with that headline for the poster, because that does kind of happen in this movie, in this scene. But because of that, it's like all CG generated because obviously those actors are no longer with us, which includes two Superman actors. I think maybe the first live action Superman, from black and white days, and then Christopher Reeve. Those were the two main ones that I like noticed. Um, One of them was just standing there, so that might have been a shot from the movie, and he might have looked okay. But Christopher Reeves did not, and they showed his version of Supergirl, which I'm not sure if she was in any of the movies because I had just barely recently watched the Christopher Reeve Superman 1 and 2, but I have not seen 3 and 4. So I'm not sure if she shows up in any of those ones, but I never heard of that happening. So I don't know if that was like a real actress that they used the likeness of to make that version of Supergirl, but it just seemed like really weird to me and like a video game. And I feel like it would have been fine if it was in a video game, but this is not a video game. It's a live action movie. It's supposed to look like real people, so it just took me out of it. And I hope that they did get permission from the family of these actors who are no longer living. But if not, then they shouldn't have done it. If they were gonna do it anyway. Um, and I feel like it didn't add anything to the movie, so that's why I think it didn't really land for me. The only one that I thought was kind of cool was Nicolas Cage as Superman, because I had heard the stories that he was gonna have his own Superman movie, where he was fighting this like giant spider, and they actually showed like a scene of that happening. And I don't know if this was made back then when they were planning it, or if they made it now for this movie to kind of like show what that could have been. But either way, that was actually really cool because it was something new. Um, Although the people in my screening laughed when they saw Nicolas Cage because he is just an odd casting as Superman, which is probably why the movie never ended up happening back then. Um, but also, I don't know how many people have heard about that story, so it's just kind of like a weird thing, like unexpected to have that happen. Um, and there was one shot of him that looked like it was actually Nicolas Cage, like he came in to do a scene for this movie, but everything else also just looked like a video game, and it might be because they also de-aged him to look like he did when they were actually going to make that movie. So I don't know. I'm really curious to find out if he actually shot a scene for this movie, like a new footage that they made. Um, but I don't know at the moment that I'm recording this. Um, and then as for the other thing that I didn't know was gonna be in this movie, the Nicolas Cage thing I did. I had heard about it. Um, and all the other cameos I had kind of known about as well. There was one at the very end in the like mid credits that I was not. Or actually, was it even the mid credits? I think it was just at the very end of the movie. I don't think there was a mid credits. There was just a post credits at the very end. Um, but it was the new Batman that is in Barry's universe after he fixes most of the stuff, but then he just changes one minor thing with the can of tomato soup. Because the way that he tried to like fix the timeline so that his mom lived was by preventing his dad from going to the store to get some tomato sauce for some pasta that they were making or that she was making, because she forgot an extra one. And as he was getting back is when she was like killed by an intruder in the house. So he made it so that she never would have needed the second one, so he never would have left, and he would have been in the house, and an intruder would have never came in. Um, but at the very end, when he fixes it, he's like, I could actually still do a slight adjustment, and he just made it so that his dad does go to the store, but in the camera footage that they had before, he never looked up, so they never could see his face, so they couldn't prove his innocence. in the main timeline. So he made it so that everything still kind of happens the same way, but they would at least have footage that could help him become a free man by having him look up, and he put the tomato can up so that he could look. But then when he comes back to this version of the universe where most of the things that were there before are back, but Bruce Wayne is no longer looks like Ben Affleck, and he's actually looks like George Clooney. So that was kind of cool because he probably got the worst Batman movie, even though I don't know if I would say he was the worst Batman. Um, I still thought he fit the role and he could do a good job as Bruce Wayne and Batman. It was just the material that he was given or the stuff around him in that movie that made it bad. So that was kind of cool, and he's also an older Bruce as well, so he kind of fit that like Michael Keaton era. And also Ben Affleck is in a similar spot, a little bit younger, but they're all kind of supposed to be older Batman. So that was really cool. And originally it was supposed to be Michael Keaton because it was gonna like be a soft reset of the universe where instead of Ben Affleck because he no longer wanted to be Batman, and Michael Keaton after doing this movie was down to do more. He was gonna stay Batman in this new universe, and that's where the Batgirl movie was gonna come in, which I was excited about. But now I kind of understand why they canceled it. It's probably not because it was necessarily bad, although maybe that is one minor reason. But it's just because under the new leadership under James Gunn and Peter Safran, they're just not gonna continue with that route that was planned with the DC universe, and they're gonna do a bigger reboot of the entire universe. Um, so they're gonna have a brand new Batman that's gonna take the reins. Um, so it wouldn't make sense to release this movie where it was gonna be a continuation of what happens in the Flash. Um, but honestly, I think they could still release it and just slap an Elseworlds label on it, and I think it would be fine. I don't think people would be too confused, especially if they did release it as it was intended to be released originally, which was just a direct HBO Max movie. Because people are not gonna be like go to the movies and then like be confused about it. I feel like it's just gonna be another movie in the DC universe, and I think this movie actually set up that being a thing that can happen and is going to happen with some of these elsewhere stories that James Gunn has already confirmed will still happen, which are the Batman sequel with Robert Pattinson and also Joker 2 with Joaquin Phoenix and maybe others. Those are the only two I think confirmed so far. Um, but I don't know. At this point, it is what it is. I'm not gonna stay mad about that. Although what I will say is that I'm kind of mad just about the situation of the reset in general because the beginning of this movie finally had it the DC extended universe fleshed out as a cohesive universe with all the characters working together. And we got cameos from like pretty much everybody from the Justice League. Henry Cavill was not in here as Superman, but Superman was in there. We saw him from the back, occupied with like a volcano situation. But he got his return in Black Adam, which was a very cool scene. Disappointing though, because it's not gonna lead anywhere. But everybody else in this movie also had a chance to kind of come in and interact again after Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was cool. Ray Fisher was blacklisted, so he was not in here, but at least Cyborg was mentioned in this movie, so that was cool. I definitely did miss him from the Flashpoint storyline. I did see the animated adaptation that they had, which was really good, and I think that movie is definitely better than this live action The Flash movie. Um, but yeah, we had Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. She's the goat. She's been in like probably the most things at this point in the DC film universe. She was in Shazam as well this year, so she had two big appearances. And then Aquaman was the post credit scene. And that was kind of funny. And I like what they did with his dad. When Barry reset the universe, that was really cool. Um, and then as for Ben Affleck's Batman, I feel like they did Ben Affleck dirty with his costume in this movie. His fucking towel looked terrible. The nose piece looked like fucked up. Like it was not pointed or it was not like perfectly like around his nose, and it just looked very cheap to me. And even though it looks kind of cool from like far away, or just to see a version of like the blue cape and cowl Batman, which is what we kind of saw from Ben Affleck's Batman in this movie. Yeah, I feel like it didn't really work. Probably because the scene that he was in was during the day, which I feel like wasn't necessary. I feel like they could have made it a night scene, and it might have been even cooler because the Flash's powers at night pop a lot more because there's like that kind of just the bright, vibrant colors that are produced by his lightning. Um, and under a dark background, I think is just a little bit more cleaner looking. So I don't know why they chose to do a Batman during the day, but yeah, it just didn't work for me. Um, and I saw somebody else say that the capes in this movie were like completely CG. I don't know what the validity of that is, but I definitely would believe it with Michael Keaton's Batman. But I thought his chase scene was really cool, and it was cool seeing Batman do that sort of thing. Like, we haven't seen Batman really get into some like really cool, crazy action scenes in any version. Um, the best fight scene was definitely Ben Affleck's in Batman versus Superman, and then Robert Pattinson's Batman got some gritty combat as well, but we never got to see him like have an extended action sequence like this, and it was pretty cool. It showed the kind of older, more experienced side of him. That was really cool, but the look was not there. And I actually think Ben Affleck, like this movie solidified it for me. Having two Batman in the same movie, Michael Keaton's and Ben Affleck's, that Ben Affleck is my favorite Batman and Bruce Wayne. Um, because his Bruce was very kind of perfect. I feel like his lines, his line delivery as Bruce Wayne just kind of matched the character perfectly. Although here he kind of seemed depressed, like even more so than he might have been before. Like I feel like in Batman versus Superman he was rageful. Zack Snyder's Justice League he was like um, regretful for the rage that he had in Batman versus Superman, but also there was like a little element of hope there. But here, for some reason, he just seemed like I don't know. It was weird. It was kind of a divide because in the daytime scenes, he seemed pretty upbeat, especially when he saw Wonder Woman, because they have a pretty good relationship. There might have been a hint of like some romantic tension there. I don't think there as any actual romance between them, but there's been that flirtation ever since their first appearance together in BVS, and it seems like he's even more like willing to open that side of himself up to her, although she's doesn't seem to really be interested. So in those scenes, he seemed like kind of positive, but on the flip side, when he was talking with Barry after he first discovers he can time travel, I don't know, he just seemed like just depressed, and it was weird that he knew the consequences of Barry time traveling and warned him about it, but he didn't seem too concerned that Barry wouldn't do it anyway, which is obviously what ended up happening and risked the fate of the entire like multiverse, and also potentially erased him out of existence. Um, so I don't know. That was kind of weird, but maybe that's why. Maybe he's like, fuck it. Like it's kind of like Ben Affleck in the real world, in that scene as Bruce Wayne, where he's like, fuck it. I'm out of this bitch anyway. Whatever happens, happens. Barry fucks everything up. He fucks it up, but I did my part. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know, but but yeah, it was funny. Um, and actually, I just thought about it, but that's a lie. Robert Pattinson is my favorite Batman, I think. But Ben Affleck is pretty close with him. Um, all the music cues were there. That was cool. The two lines that we already knew Michael Keaton says as Batman from the original movies. Well, actually, they're both from the first one, Batman, 1989. Watching the trailer, I wasn't sure if they would work in the context of the movie. I feel like here they did. Like I didn't mind them, but they didn't like do anything for me. Like it didn't give me any nostalgia, probably because I didn't see those movies when they happened. But also like the line of "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." That was never like a big line or like an important line or like a line that I really heard repeated. It was just something that happened in the movie. But here, the way that they used it, it did make sense. Um, I feel like the part where he says "I'm Batman," that part maybe made a little bit less sense actually, because at that point Barry already knows that he's Batman, that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and he steps out there. It's just that was the first time he saw him in the suit as Batman. But like because of his reaction, like I don't know, I think it works. I don't really mind it too much. Um, but those sort of scenes and like elements just with Michael Keaton returning as a previous version of Batman, I would compare more similarly to Spider-Man: No Way Home, with that movie's introduction, or not introduction, reintroduction to Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Um, but I feel like this movie does not do that side of the multiverse aspect nearly as well as Spider-Man: No Way Home did. And I always hear people give that movie slack of just being like a nostalgia fest, but I would disagree with that statement because they actually made those returning characters essential characters for the movie that they were the story that they were telling in that movie. Whereas here, Michael Keaton is a big factor, but I don't know if they needed him really in the movie. Like if it needed to be Michael Keaton, it could have been like the original storyline with Thomas Wayne Batman, and I don't think it would have changed that much. Um, but I think the reason why the choice to have it not be that version of Batman and be an older version is because it connects it more directly to Barry's story with like losing his parents, and it wouldn't become just a Batman movie, which I think that kind of scene does do in the animated movie that I've seen of Flashpoint. Because there's like a scene kind of where there's a direct connection between Thomas Wayne Batman and Bruce Wayne Batman, where there's like kind of some closure that could happen with Batman as a character through the multiverse. Um, Whereas here, they didn't want to do that because it's not a Batman movie; it's Barry's movie, the Flash movie. So I think they made the right call for that. But like I said in my non-spoiler review, they didn't give Michael Keaton anything new to do. It was just some familiar territory where he could kind of like come in and just enjoy the part, which he definitely did. Like you could tell that he enjoyed coming back as Batman. Um, they were gonna give him new stuff to do with that like plan that they had, so it would have been cool if we did get to see that, but unfortunately we didn't. So in this movie alone, he's just there really for nostalgia purposes. But it made it easier probably for like general audiences to kind of get behind it because they feel something in terms of having that nostalgia factor. But No Way Home actually, I think, advanced the stories of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and even the villains that they brought back as well, mainly with Green Goblin and Doc Ock. But um, I don't know. I think they had a bigger purpose in No Way Home than they did here. So when it comes to Zod, bringing him back specifically, Zod is not really given anything to do. So it makes sense to me when I heard that Michael Shannon was like that he didn't feel satisfied by his role in the Flash, and he knew like what he basically was there for, which was just to be an obstacle for Barry Allen, the Flash. And in that sense, it kind of ties with the whole CG third act kind of CG fest, where it's just like a video game, and Zod is like a video game like boss fight kind of. Um, the Flash doesn't actually fight Zod; it's Supergirl who fights him. But obviously, just the whole scenario is something that he needs to overcome. So that was kind of unfortunate. But whereas in Spider-Man: No Way Home, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, they all got some substance to their roles. Um, so that was kind of unfortunate. It would have been better if they did have time to give more for Zod, but I understand that they didn't because it would have been kind of a little bit too busy. The way that they did it, it was more focused, but it's just kind of unfortunate, like I said. So the explanation of the multiverse was really cool, especially with how it tied to Barry's story, with how he kind of the reason that everything happened when he was a kid, losing his mom and having his dad go to prison with the cooking scene, and then that's how he decided to fix it. When they first go to Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton, he explains the multiverse with pasta, and I feel like that explanation was really cool because it made sense to me how it's like a fulcrum point where there's like two intervening paths of like two different universes or timelines. The one that Barry was on, where he goes back to and then like changes things, but then another one that he creates by changing it, where it's not just everything from that point forward that changes, and then the history behind that stays the same, but everything about it changes except for the point itself. Like that point is like an intersection point between the two universes where something similar happens in both of them, but the whole history beforehand is different, and then consequently, obviously, as well, the future is also different. And that was cool because that was different from the MCU's explanation in Endgame, where they create branch timelines where wherever they go back to, it doesn't change anything before that, but whatever they do, if it's different, which obviously it is, it just creates a new future, but the past is still the same. Um, and I don't know which one is like closer to like real scientific theories or if they're two different scientific theories, which probably is the case because obviously nobody has all the answers. They don't know for sure. But it's cool to see like different versions of that kind of thinking behind how the multiverse would work. Um, and I've also heard comparisons of this movie with Across the Spider Verse beyond even what like I mentioned about the CGI or like cameo stuff. Um, in terms of like the actual like plot points or explanations of the multiverse. And the thing that I'm thinking about more specifically is like in Spider Verse, it's the canon events, things that have to happen and always happen in every universe and every version of this character or these versions of a character's lives. This is kind of touched on here, but it's not nearly as fleshed out as it was in Spider Verse, and I feel like it's not as like integral to the movie. Um, but there's like one scene that was kind of cool about it where Barry mentions like every version of Batman Bruce Wayne has an Alfred, who for Michael Keaton at this point has passed away. Um, and like the actor actually did pass away a while ago. Um, but it was a nice nod to him to have that moment in the movie. And then there's also kind of a discussion about like fate, where there's some things about Barry that are the same, whether his he had that tragedy as a kid or didn't. Um, and then some things that just can't be fixed. And that was kind of a recurring line that happened between Barry and his mom. That she says to him when he's a kid doing a math problem, like what are the different ways that you can make, or like problems that you can make that would equal 14, I think, something like that. And he's like, there's too many. Like, how are we supposed to put it all? Um, and she tells him like, not everything is meant to be solved, or not everything has an answer, something along those lines. Um, and that's kind of what he tells himself, his younger version of himself at the end, in the Chrono Bowl. And that kind of brings me to my next thought too, with Dark Flash. And I don't think Dark Flash was nearly as interesting as Reverse Flash would have been, with what was given to him in this movie. And I, as well as many other people predicted, Dark Flash was the other Barry, the younger Barry. But I do like that the one thing that I wasn't 100% expecting, like I didn't really have specific expectations about it, but I did like that he was not just that same exact Barry from that like time, and like he was like a mastermind and like plotted everything and was just hiding it the whole time. It's like a future version of this Barry who has gone back in time over and over and over again to try to prevent his mom from dying, and it just never worked. So that's kind of like a canon event for Barry, no matter what universe it is. I think the difference with that universe's Barry though is that I think the entire world was gonna end, and it was not just his mom, and then he's the Flash. That world was just like you couldn't save that universe. That universe was destined to be destroyed. Um, so that was kind of interesting. But I didn't like Dark Flash's look, the design of him, or his story. If they would have done more with it, maybe it would have been cool. But I think it would have been cooler if they just had a Reverse Flash in the movie, or even a tease at him. Because they never do explain like how Barry's mom died. And it seems at this point like it was just a random like mugger, or well, not mugger, but burglar who thought the house was empty, and just went in. But because it was not, there was a struggle with a knife when his mom was cooking and she got stabbed. So that's kind of what it seemed like. Um, and I don't know if they even needed any version of that side of the Flashpoint story. Like they didn't even need Reverse Flash or Dark Flash. It could have just literally been younger Barry getting older, and we didn't even need to see him doing it, but we could have just seen him come back and like kind of just get more and more hopeless every time he does it, and then Barry like just finally tell him, older Barry, that like we can't we can't fix it. And honestly, I think that would have probably been more emotionally impacting if they had done it like that. So yeah, I was not a fan of Dark Flash at all. Um, what this movie did make me do though is want to watch some more of the DC animated movies, and I want to rewatch Flashpoint because it's a better version of this kind of story. Um, and the next one on my list is Superman Red Sun, because here we see Supergirl and she's in Russia, not the U.S., which I think is where Superman was in the Flashpoint animated movie. Um, it's a similar like sort of thing where they're like holding him hostage and captive, and draining his power, but in this it's Supergirl in Russia, and then there's a an Elseworld story with Superman where he landed in Russia and was raised by the Soviet Union to be a operative of the Soviets, um, and that seems like a really cool kind of concept, especially because Krypton's sun was a red sun, but here it's like red. It's got a double meaning. Red Sun, SUSON, as a son of the Soviet Union. So I think that's a kind of cool concept. And then there's a bunch of Batman animated movies that I want to catch up on too, including The Long Halloween, which the Batman movie was inspired by. And I haven't seen any other version of that story yet. I've heard about it, and I've seen Hush, which was also somewhat inspired for the Batman movie. I don't know if there's any correlation between those two, except maybe the involvement of the Riddler. But um, yeah, and there's probably some others as well, and maybe some of the cartoons. One of the cool multiverse things that the movie did do was in the opening, the intro. They had like all the different variations of the DC logo. That was really cool. Kind of similar to this, what they did in the trailer for the characters and their logos. They did that for DC, so that was really cool to see, and a cool way to kind of turn that cool trailer moment in the actual film. So that I already like that. That was really cool for sure. So some things that I forgot to mention was that a cool thing about this movie was the way that they used the two berries to kind of tell an origin story for the Flash, even though this was not an origin story. Because by the time we first see him in the DC film universe, he already has his powers, and by Zack Snyder's Justice League, he's already pretty damn good with his powers. Showing by the fact that he was able to fucking reverse time in that movie. Um, but here they use the younger Barry to kind of still allow the audience to see his origin story because Barry, the older Barry, needs to recreate the events of his origin to give younger Barry powers because he thinks that if he doesn't get his powers, then himself in the future will never have the speed powers, which would change everything and change his whole perception of himself. So he would kind of need those powers. So he made sure that he gets them by putting him where he needs to be the first time. Um, and through there, through him, we see kind of a version of a Flash origin story, but it's not the main Flash's origin. It's this alternate Flash's origin story. And I thought that was really cool. And we also did get flashbacks of early main Flash, where he did already have his powers during the events of Man of Steel, I think he had got them like a few weeks before Zod's invasion, um, or something along those lines. And he didn't have like an official Flash suit yet, but he didn't know how to control his powers enough, so he wasn't able to do much to help Superman in that movie. So I thought that was kind of cool, um, that they showed that side of it. And the Flash's powers were really cool. It was cool that they showed the phasing and how that works. And yeah, just the visuals of it was really cool. Um, Now, kind of on the flip side of that, I was glad to see Iris West in this movie, but she isn't really like an important character, and she's not really given much more than she had in Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was just like an introduction to her. Here, it's basically just another introduction to her, but we do get some context, some backstory that was not there before, where we find out that Barry and Iris were college classmates that he had a crush on. So I don't know if he was like stalking her in Zack Snyder's Justice League, or if they just happened to both kind of cross paths there. Um, Maybe they were both in school at the time still. I don't know. But yeah, we don't really get much from her, and it kind of goes to show that this movie is not really a world building movie for the Flash as a character in terms of rounding out his supporting cast. It's more of a world building film for DC as a whole, and we see those Justice League cameos that were all really cool, but we don't really get much of the Flash's individual story beyond his parents, um, which was okay, but I think I would have preferred a movie that was more focused on the Flash himself and supporting characters, because all I really know about them, besides Iris, is everything that I've seen in the Flash TV show, and I don't know if that's even like part of the like comic canon, if those characters are like important or not, like Cisco and all that. So this at least, yeah, kind of whet my appetite for some more DC, but I think that's all I have to say right now. So thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to see what James Gunn does with his DC universe. I hope it's good, and it has to be. I think if it's not, then I think DC as a brand, and film is just dead, unfortunately, at this point. But I do have faith with what he's done with the Guardians, so fingers crossed it turns out great. Um, Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.